A life-changing Bigfoot encounter leaves a man physically ill, the entire family horrified. Hey everyone, welcome to Mountain Beast Mysteries. Today we're going to be talking about an incredible life-changing Bigfoot encounter that happened in Jasper National Park here in my home province of Alberta. This encounter happened to a firm non-believer, and after it happened, you can guarantee he became a believer. I actually used to live and work in Jasper National Park myself back in 2011. I was a whitewater river guide, so I literally spent every day in the outdoors and regularly had incredible wildlife encounters with everything from grizzly bears to elk to wolves, you name it, I encountered it. However, I personally had no Bigfoot encounters or experiences out there. I wasn't even actively exploring the topic back then, and I don't think during my time there the thought of Bigfoot or Sasquatch even crossed my mind once. I was just so into my work and rock climbing and hiking that I just didn't even think about it at all. Which is a shame, because if I lived there now, I'd be out there every day looking for evidence of this creature, because there's actually a lot of Bigfoot history in the Jasper area. The most famous account being the story of explorer David Thompson and his discovery of Bigfoot-like tracks way back in 1811. Ken Walker, the taxidermist and Bigfoot enthusiast we all know and love, told me about an incredible Bigfoot encounter that happened at a cabin somewhere in Jasper National Park that ended up with a person actually going missing. And I personally know of someone who completely vanished off the face of the earth in Jasper National Park after going on a casual swim in one of the crystal clear lakes. One of my old wildland firefighting bosses told me years back that his uncle, and I believe his dad as well, was there. They'd both witnessed a Sasquatch creature observing them from a rocky outcropping kind of above them in the mountains. None of this really comes as any surprise, because if you travel directly east of Jasper, you coincidentally enter the Nordegg area almost exactly where the famous Alberta habituation site is, and the legendary Alberta tree structures that I've showcased many times on this channel in the past. Anyways, I think I've set the stage well enough on Jasper National Park for the sharing of this encounter, so I'm going to get into it now. Now, this encounter happened back in 2016 and was submitted to us here at the Alberta Sasquatch organization from an East Coaster. And he was working in Alberta at the time, and this was on a vacation that he went on in Jasper National Park. It's an amazing encounter, and I hope you all enjoy it, so here we go. Here's a quick account of my experience. It was the spring of 2016, and to those who can remember, it was a very warm April and May. My in-laws had come from Nova Scotia to visit for the spring. My father-in-law, a deep-voiced African man, couldn't wait to see the wildlife in Jasper. So off we went, kids loaded in our minivan, to head to Jasper. What sticks out in my mind was how much wildlife we had witnessed just on our way up into Jasper. My wife had pointed out 3 bears just on our drive up, and we saw numerous mule deer and other assorted wildlife. In fact, during a brief fishing trip with the kids and my father-in-law, we literally ran into dozens more elk and deer and had to show them away from our fishing spots. Sure enough, we left in a hurry so my father-in-law could make it back to Calgary. Leaving in the morning, I felt very lucky for some odd reason, and I even bought a lottery ticket, which is something I never did. As we drove back to Calgary, we soon saw more thin, small black bears as we drove past the sparse pine trees on the outskirts of town. Being rushed by our father-in-law was not in our plan, so as he sped away in his rental car, we decided to stop off at the first lookout we saw to get pictures. Pulling into the half-moon-shaped asphalt Athabasca Lookout, the first thing I noticed was the garbage that was scattered by a small path headed down towards the tree line near the garbage cans. I wanted to get a great photo of the mountains, so I headed towards the path. As I did, I ran into what can only be described as British hippie hipsters. We began to speak about the abundance of wildlife, and he, out of the blue, brought up Bigfoot as if he was serious. Having researched in my spare time the issues and the responses on the subject from the local Cree boys at the frac leases I worked on in Fox Creek, it didn't fill me with confidence. Nonetheless, I proceeded to BS him as if they were common and probably in the area as we spoke. not believing a word I was saying as I was just enjoying messing around with a fool. I took a small footpath towards the ridge, taking notice of all the bees and small, fat rodents and birds camouflaged amongst the gray dead pine and flowers. Again, the abundance and accessibility of wildlife was awe-inspiring. As I stood on the ridge, my oldest boy, who, to his credit, is very brave and not easily disturbed, quickly said he was scared and ran back to his mother and siblings standing above the ridge, standing close to the stainless steel rail with tourists. I began trying to frame the mountains in the background, being careful to exclude the trees which were in my way. As I was doing this, I heard a loud popping, cracking, and snapping noise to my 10 o'clock. Shocked by the intensity of the noise, my eyes began to focus on a tall black object. My mind quickly tried to categorize what I was looking at. First I thought a bear sliding down a tree, but no, it wasn't that. The next thought was, what is this big man doing down there with a skull hoodie zipped up all the way, and a tree in his hand? As soon as I noticed seeing the depth of the eyes set in the skull, and the muscles bulging in his deltoids, I quickly lost my composure as I realized I was looking at a large male Sasquatch, a lanky, broad-shouldered one at that. The rest is a blur in my mind as I stared intently for a second before turning towards my family on the ridge, whisper yelling my wife's name trying to get her attention, before turning back moments after it had heard me and booked it into the woods with the loud descending bang, boom, crash that a 9-foot-tall beast would make running through dry boreal forest. Wearing flip-flops, I struggled to get a better vantage point to try and see if it was sneaking back. I grabbed a big rock and in one big underhand throw tossed it into the forest, hoping to get a reaction. My shoulder still has a tear in it, as the adrenaline was pumping and I really did toss it with too much gusto. Coming to my senses, I ran to the car where my family was panicking, and my wife and I began to comprehend in a panicked way what had just happened, with the kids crying in the back. I drove super focused until we saw our in-laws at the hostel a few kilometers down the road, talking to some baby boomer lawyer types. I got out and stealthily threw up from the adrenaline. We played it cool as we stood for photos and pretended like nothing even happened. These things suck, and they are ugly. So what do you guys think about that? This family went out on a quick day trip to Jasper National Park from Calgary, and they went out there, saw a bunch of wildlife. They turned around to head back towards Calgary, and on their way back they stopped in at the Athabasca Lookout and saw something they never thought they would ever experience in their lives. I mean, I don't know how familiar with the Bigfoot topic the wife and kids were. They seemed to be pretty shook up and completely terrified as to what they just saw. But the father, the guy who actually wrote and sent in the encounter, he was already familiar with the Bigfoot topic, wasn't a believer at all. He had, talked to fellow coworkers who were First Nations coworkers in Fox Creek about it, and he just kind of just entertained the idea with them, but more or less laughed it off until this happened. And, he was even talking about Bigfoot with some other tourists there at the time, and probably didn't expect this to happen at all. And it seems like when you least expect it is when you have an encounter. Now, apparently there were more tourists up where the mother and the kids were standing and, at the lookout. I wonder if they saw it as well, these other tourists. I wonder if they have anything to say. Who knows? Like, there's no way to find them and to track them down and to, actually determine if they saw something. The only way you'd find out is if one of them came forward with information. But it's impossible to find, specific people in that sense. So, seems to be a genuine encounter. He got a good look at it. Now, he says he first kind of thought that it was a person with a hoodie. Those skull hoodies? The hood of it zips up all the way, and they usually have a picture of a skull on it. They're just a dumb thing that usually teenagers buy and wear. I used to see kids wearing those in high school quite often, but, it kind of had the appearance of being a skull. That's what the face of it kind of looked like, but it just had a really definitive bone structure, and the eyes were really far back into the head, and it was kind of shapely like that. Very creepy, very scary, broad, strong shoulders, just an absolute beast. And it took off making lots of noise into the bush. I like hearing of encounters like this so close to home, in places that I'm quite familiar with. I used to go trekking around Jasper National Park every single day. And I unfortunately wasn't lucky enough to have any experiences like this, but in recent years I've heard so many stories about people running into them. And the area, of Jasper National Park and the area around it is just like vast wilderness. So much space, not a lot of people. Like Jasper National Park is a very touristy park in the sense that the town site of Jasper is usually very busy. But when you get deep into the woods and into the backcountry, there's not a lot of people. Most of the tourists, they stay on the beaten path. They like to go to restaurants, they like to go to gift shops, and that's where all the people are. So lots of places to hide in a protected park. Anyways, let me know what you guys think of this encounter down in the comments. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you next time on Mountain Beast Mysteries.